I think we can start. We have a few folks from our end up here already. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can. Thanks, Glenn. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good on my end as well.
Perfect. Okay, we'll go ahead and start then. First of all, thank you everybody for joining our DAO discussion today. I know I said it in the reminders I was posting in the channels, but I really do believe our topic today is an important one, and I wanted to encourage everyone to participate. So, although we have a couple of us contributors here up on the stage, I don't want it to just be us. If you have something to contribute and you want to participate in the conversation, by all means, please just put your hand up and join us. Um, the topic is fees, protocol fees, right? And I think there are two things that we really want to discuss, one being taker fees and the other being maker fees. And we've spoken about both of them previously, but never what they would actually be set at. And I think it's kind of important that we speak to them together. I'm not sure if we've done that either. Before I really get into it, I just want to say, before I even voice my own opinion or ask Mark's, um, I want to ask everybody their own, and if everybody is more comfortable just kind of for us, then we can go that route too. But Glenn, I want to kind of refer to the first article that was written when Carbon was launched, Introduction to Carbon. It kind of had a layout protocol fees. And it really just says, there's a taker fee. A trader that is acquiring tokens at the spot price might be charged a DAO set percentage fee taken from the destination token at completion, and then maker fee. And Mark, maybe before I do this, for anybody who might not be familiar, you can just kind of explain what a maker fee is, what a taker fee is, what a maker and the taker are within the actual protocol.
Yeah, certainly. So because Carbon is so order book-like, I think it makes sense to just emulate the way that centralized order books work with regards to fees. And so if you go to any order book anywhere on any centralized exchange, there's a fee when an order is made, and there's a fee when the order is taken. Now, obviously, the fee when the order is made is generally very, very low. And then the fee when the order is taken is something like 20 basis points up to 30 basis points, depending on the token pair. I think it makes sense for us to just have a across the board taker fee that's set to something very competitive. So I'm gravitating towards something like 20 basis points. Uniswap uses 30 basis points for most of its pairs, but they also have the ability to change fees on certain pairs as well. I think they've driven their stablecoin pairs down even farther than that. I think maybe to 10 basis points, maybe even lower in some cases. So yeah, that's basically how it works. I want to correct something that you said there just a minute ago, which is that it's always taken from the destination token. It'll actually depend on specifically which function is being called. So for example, if you are requesting to sell a certain number, right? So let's say the number of ETH that you want to sell is exactly 1, and you're trying to swap that into USDC, then in that case, it will be taken from the destination token. Whereas if you are requesting to receive a certain amount of USDC and you don't know how much ETH that is going to require you to sell, in that case, it's taken from the source token. So there is a very slight discrepancy there. And if you take into account the pricing mechanic as you trade through a curve, then technically you get a negligible better deal if you are taking from the source than from the target. But because we've done the financial analysis on it, and it doesn't make any difference. So it can be taken from the source or the target when you're trading, right? When you're taking. So this means to trade on the spot. And when you're making, the model that we're considering is to always take it from the gas token, right? Because we know that that's something that's going to be there. And rather than that being a percentage, we want that to be a fixed rate. And so in that case, it actually incentivizes much larger makers, right? So, if let's say that the maker fee is like $1, for example, then when you're making a position with $100, then your fee is technically 1%, which is quite high. Whereas if you're making a fee with $1,000, then it's only 0.1%. If you're making a fee with $1 million, then it's only 1 ppm. So I think a flat maker fee is probably the model that's going to work the best. But this is also, I guess, a good topic of discussion to continue with on the rest of this call.
Right. At one point, I think one of the discussions that had occurred was not even having a maker fee when Carbon initially launches. So I think should there even be a fee? Like, should there be a fee when Carbon launches? That's kind of the first discussion. And I think then if the answer is yes, then we can kind of discuss what that fee would be. I'm curious if anybody on the call right now, or Glenn, you guys are up here. Mark, you kind of just gave your opinion. If you want to, elaborate on that at all, I encourage you to do so. But I'm curious if either of you or anybody else listening would like to request and voice their opinion on it. Also, I think there are pros and cons to each, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say first before, like I said, I voice my own opinion.
Yeah, so I think in general, where it's not like it's naked profiteering or something like that. The maker fee is going to be very, very small. So I've listened to the argument that like it might help with bootstrapping and things like that, and I don't mind, right? If that's how we want to do it, then that's how we'll do it. But I think that in general, it's going to be so small that users won't really notice. So I don't think that there's too much difference either way. But obviously, to bootstrap in your protocol, maybe you do want to remove as much friction as possible. So maybe having zero maker fee for the beta period, and then when we move to the the stable system or whatever we're calling it, the post beta phase, then yeah, maybe we can activate it then. But whatever. I don't have any super strong opinions on it. I think it's cleaner to just have it be the same throughout. And then it's not sort of like a news event or something when we switch it on or whatever like that. I think in a way, having it be zero and then having it be non-zero later, it kind of just adds to the noise, and it adds to the communication burden, I think. And so just having it be consistent, I think, is where I'm leaning. But like I said, my opinion is not really that strong. And so if others have a stronger opinion on it, then I'm very happy to concede my position.
Mark, did you give a proposed value for the maker fee? Was it 10 basis points or?
The maker fee isn't proportional. It'll be a fixed rate, probably like $1 or $2 or something like that in ETH terms. So this means that wherever we deploy Carbon, like whatever the chain is, the protocol is guaranteed to be accumulating the gas token, which will be important for for other DAO operations and things that we might want to do in these other chains. So yeah, I think that rather than it being like 10 basis points or something, it should just be flat. I think that Glenn actually introduced me to that concept, and so I think that I'd like to listen to him talk about it a little bit more, because he was actually the genesis of that that way of handling the maker fee. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting if it is flat. It would encourage, I would say, large market makers whenever you're trying to create like an order with a lot of funding, right? Knowing that it's a flat fee and it's not some basis points. So definitely would encourage, I would say, liquidity in that sense. The other thing to think about is once we have these fees in place, we can also do some of the, I guess, what the common centralized exchanges are doing with their so-called, I guess, tokens for those platforms, right? Whether that is like a discount model or something along these lines, right? Like, but essentially using BNT instead, right? So this way, we might even say that if you're making markets with like BNT, right? Because we want to encourage BNT market making in Carbon, maybe there is no market making fee, right? Whenever you're doing that activity on Carbon. The other thing I was going to say is all of these fees right now are kind of like global and set in stone, right? So you can't really have the flexibility of picking and choosing if you want to have a different fee for like a certain trading pair, right? So think of this like Uniswap, which has they have different fee tiers for like the same pool. I believe there's like four now that you can like pick and choose when creating a pool. That might be something I think we might consider down the road as well, right? If we want some more flexibility across like trading pairs, we might have, instead of a global fee, right, just have it be on a per trading pair fee that gets applied. So other considerations along those lines should also be interesting, obviously, for the MVP. We want to sort of go to market as soon as possible, so we can't really do as many things as we want. But obviously, if the DAO wants us to do something else on the road, by all means, like, this is what governance is for. We're always listening there to like ideas, and if you have like any cool thoughts, I would say around like BNT utility or something along these lines in Carbon, make sure that you put that out there for us to see.
Yeah, I think there's a discussion and discourse around that existing. I like what you proposed in terms of not having it be like basis points, having it just be a flat the street. And Tyler, I mean, you guys are up here. What are your thoughts on that now that Glenn kind of explained it a little bit further?
I was testing my mic. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yes.
I'm with Mark on the starting off consistent, going, the bridge, even if it's small, just going from zero to something. I feel like that can only be kind of turbulent. I don't see a lot of upside. So I agree with him there. And with you on the flat rate on market making. I think that's just a great way to approach it.
So one way we could handle it is you can still do it as a proportion, but you can do it as a proportion of the gas. And this way we might actually save a lot of money with things like requiring like Oracle price feeds or something like that. So you can imagine if the gas is going to be like 100K GWay or something like that, we just add like 1% to that. And that's going to end up, being like, if it's, if it's $20 or something to set up a position, then the protocol will collect, 20 cents or something like that. And then this at least means that for the very large players that want to move, millions of dollars around all the time, it's not going to be, it's barely going to factor into their decision making. Whereas if we're charging like even like 10 basis points, that does scare away, some of the large makers that might be wanting to place orders with, millions of dollars or something like that. This is one of the things that I spoke about very recently with, some of the whales that are considering using the protocol. And to have it be a negligible amount means that they're going to feel a lot more comfortable moving stuff around and putting in very large orders and that kind of thing. Whereas, if you're a very, very small fish, like if you're doing something like with $100 or something like that, then, maybe it factors into decision making, maybe not. It's we're going to have to wait to see how that plays out. But I do think that a flat fee is for making is the right economics, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it made me think of, even just on interest rates, like a LIBOR plus something. Like I'm just thinking that in terms of gas. Like I really like that approach.
So, well, first of all, I know that I've said it a couple of times, but if anybody's listening, like I know we have a couple of new people in here. So if you didn't catch it at the beginning, this call isn't limited to just the ones up on the stage. So request to speak if you want to, voice your opinion on this. Tyler, you originally asked Mark what he was thinking in terms of like a set basis point, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are now on having like a flat fee.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really good points presented here. I was originally thinking, no fees for makers, just for the sake of having a frictionless experience for first time users. I think everyone's a first time user when we're launched on mainnet. So, but I do agree in the sense of having a flat fee sort of nullifies that concern for me. I think even if I was playing around with $100 to $500 and I wanted to make a strategy, I'm not going to be mad at giving the protocol $1 to do that.
Right.
Or if I have to cancel an existing strategy and make a new one, I'm still not mad at, let's say, $1. But I this is just my personal opinion. I of course want to hear what everybody in the DAO has to say in the community. But yeah, I'd be totally fine with the flat fee for makers on day one mainnet.
So do we
Good.
think that it would be, because Mark, you're going to ultimately take this discussion and kind of what we discuss here and work this into the proposal for the Bancor DAO when you present on discourse for launching Carbon. So
Yeah,
we kind of,
yeah. I'm
I
hoping.
mean, at least everyone up here is that it can be a flat fee. This wouldn't be to us or to bootstrapping liquidity, right? But would it be
Exactly.
the dollar? Would it be $1? Would it be $2? Is
Well,
it something that you're going to kind of think about and play with on your own, or is it something that we
it's
should have in
like I
this
said.
discussion?
Yeah, I'm kind of using that as kind of like a baseline. But obviously it's going to depend on the gas price and the price of ETH, right? Because of what what I think that we should absolutely avoid is something like a price oracle or something like that for ETH, to make sure we're always taking exactly that US dollar amount. Problem with that is that it's going to add like so much more gas overhead by itself, because that would mean like another contract call from the person who's making a position. And that alone, rather than pay rather than pay the validators more gas fees, just to know what the price of ETH is, I think we would prefer just, taking whatever that gas fee is and just giving it to the protocol. And so, sometimes it might be $1, sometimes it might be $1.50, sometimes it might be 90 cents, whatever it happens to be. And again, these are baseline numbers. I need to have a closer look at it. But basically, yeah, something like 1% of whatever the gas is, right? So after the contract has calculated what the gas is going to be, we just add 1%. I think that's a fairly a really easy way to handle it. That's going to keep the overall gas consumption of the contracts really low. And also, means that we're not, constantly giving more ETH to validators. I think they get enough already.
I don't disagree with that at all. It actually makes it really clean and consistent, I think, across the board. And that would be for creating a strategy, correct? Would that be for editing strategies, adjusting parameters, things of that sort?
Yeah, so I think at the moment, when you are, so it'll be adjusting strategy. It'll be everything that requires interacting with that contract, like let's call it the maker contract, that requires gas consumption. So yeah, I think it will be, technically once you've already, like the biggest gas cost is making the strategy from scratch. But then when you're adjusting it, that's obviously very small. So like I said, the idea is to keep it small enough as to be negligible, like essentially down in the error, the noise of the gas cost anyway. So if we make it so small that the individual user doesn't really care, then I think that's winning. Whereas if it's, if we make it so large that it's enough to make people reconsider what they're doing, then that's losing, right? We don't want that. So that's kind of my position.
Small enough that it won't really make a big difference to them. They won't care, but enough of them will make a big difference to the DAO and to our position at the moment. I mean, we all know what our ultimate goal here was and the thought behind, even launch Carbon and creating Carbon. So working towards that goal, even if it's just little bit to where the users don't see this difference, but we do, emulating, I think that's a win.
Yeah, exactly. And because it's all part of the same transaction, it won't, it's not going to, it won't affect the overall, the overall economics for the individual, right? But it has a large impact on the economics of the protocol.
We can revisit that if anybody wants to think on it. Just because I was going to move on to taker fees doesn't mean that we can't. So if anyone has a thought, if you're not comfortable joining the call and getting up here on the stage, you can also add your comments and your opinions in the live stage calls on the top left above where you join the call from. What about
taker fees? I'm more
interested. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is something that we should discuss in a lot more detail. So Like, for example, I don't support the idea of these different fee tiers. It could be, you know, there's likely some arguments that I haven't heard yet, and that might change my mind. But in general, like the reason why protocols like Uniswap v3 have these different fee tiers is because that is directly impacting the risk profile of the maker, right? So, for example, if you are on Uniswap v3 and you are choosing one of these different fee tiers, what you're choosing is your own profitability, or you're adjusting the the payout profile given a certain expectation of how the markets are going to move. We've spent a lot of time on these discussions and on Twitter Spaces and stuff discussing the short gamma option that you effectively have on something like Uniswap v3, and what you're effectively choosing there is the premium that you're willing to that you're hoping to be paid for holding that option. Whereas on Carbon, it's not that at all, right? You are actually trying to buy low, sell high, right? It's a very different sort of system. And whatever the fee is, it only like marginally affects the maker, right? Whereas on Uni v3, it has a profound effect on the maker. So I think in our system, it does make sense just for like cleanliness of execution and not having overcomplicated smart contract construction, to just have a single basis point that affects all trades. And I think it should be low, right? I think it should be something like 20 basis points. And in a way, that's just kind of my gut feeling. The consensus I think across the industry right now is something like 30 basis points, and I think that we can undercut that fairly healthily. Again, because it doesn't affect the profitability of the makers at all, and it makes the price execution a little bit easier to maintain. So that's my view on it. It does mean that some token pairs, like DAI USDC or something, will mean that there's always a 20 basis point gap. But in general, I think when we've discussed stablecoin pairs and things like that, it really is about trading well rather than trading often. So trying to catch these falling knives when things are temporarily depegging. That's something that I think is a much better use case for Carbon than trying to facilitate enormous trade volumes through certain token pairs. Having said that, I've already detailed in some of the documentation I prepared earlier that we can create different types of bonding curves using the formulas that I've already presented. And if we wanted to create something that was curve-like, then that's totally reasonable. We can talk about that later. But I think for MVP, we really should just be focusing on keeping stuff as clean and as simple as possible. And so I would like to know if people think 20 basis points is satisfactory. Maybe we're undercutting it too much. Maybe we should just stick to the industry standard of 30 basis points. I want to know what people think about it, because whatever consensus we sort of arrive at on this call is likely going to be the thing that I propose, as I am, hoping to get the proposal up, fully written and up in the next couple of days. So we should tie up this loose end.
I'd like to answer your question with a question. Mark, does having 20 basis points help at all with MEV searchers, or is there any, I know you mentioned kind of being able to undercut the market has some advantage. Are there any other advantages that you can think of to doing 20 basis points?
The best way to think about it is that it's the same everywhere, right? So when Uniswap v3 says that their fee is 0.3%, that's the difference between what the marginal price is quoted at versus what the taker actually receives, right? So you add that small delta onto it. So if Uniswap had zero fees everywhere, it would just mean that the price that you're paying as a taker is always 0.3% lower. And it's the same on Carbon. If we decided to set the taker fee to zero, it would just mean that the arbitrage margin, is effectively grows by that amount. So I think, yeah, as long as we're in the sub 1% sort of categories, it's, it does make MEV searches and things like that just a little bit more efficient. So yeah, for a 30 basis point fee, just remember that what we're doing is essentially saying that if someone is going to pay a price of $100 for something, if you add the 30 basis points, they're now paying $100.30. And so if that 30 cents is the difference between an arbitrage, being able to successfully execute versus it not being able to successfully execute, then the MEV will calculate that. The MEV protocol or trader or whoever it happens to be will take that under consideration, and because they are deterministic in the way that they do stuff, then essentially the lower you drive the fee, the more likely you are to be able to complete an order. The more likely you are to be able to complete an order at whatever the market maker has asked for. So it does make a difference. It's a small difference, right? We're talking about cents, sometimes a lot less than that. But yeah, it's if we drive it, you can't drive it arbitrarily high, because it just means that the protocol is effectively overpricing everything compared to what the makers have asked for. So yeah,
Okay.
it will make a difference. We know that arbitrage margins are already razor thin. So those 10 basis points between 30 and 20 do matter. But in a trending market, it won't matter.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I think I would support pretty much everything Mark just proposed. I'd like to hear well, first of all, I also agree with Mark in the sense of I'd prefer for this not to be this back and forth experimental thing that's always a question mark with carbon throughout the future of carbon. So it's important to kind of front run that by having a very concise and clear discussion about it now and on our discourse forums. Can I hear the counter argument? Because we kind of have this two parties, right? We have the people that have that want carbon to be bootstrapped with strategies right away and used from day one frequently. To do that, it makes sense to have more affordable fees and all that. And then we have sort of BNT holders who, because of the mechanism of BNT and how it's burned using carbon, they might want to consider a higher fee. So what would be the negative to, let's say, let's just up the fee to 50 basis points? Mark, can you kind of outline the scenario, like the negatives of doing that? And just your take on that would be appreciated.
Yeah. So, it's going to sound like it's nothing at all, but just remember what I said about the arbitrage stuff being razor thin, right? Some people will do a transaction involving a flash loan of $1 million or more and still only collect a couple of dollars in profit by the end of it, right? So the margins really are pretty tight, and so just keep that in mind. Okay, so the way that the taker fee affects stuff. Let's say that Tyler has put up an order and he wants to sell 10 ETH or something for I don't know $2,000, right? And so he's expecting to get $20,000 or something for completing that order. Let's say that we set the fee to 1%. Okay. That would mean that even though Tyler's price has been posted at $20,000 to take all of these ETH from the system, the actual cost to the trader would be $20,000 plus 1%, right? So it would be $20,200 for the trader. And that means that if the market doesn't get to 20,200, that price wouldn't have been fulfilled. Okay, so what if we roll it back to 0.5%, which is 500 basis points? Okay, so in that case, now all of Tyler's ETH is going to be sold for $20,100, right? And the protocol's taking that 100, and the 20,000 goes to Tyler. So you can see how this matters, right? Because it's really about price resolution. And so if we continue to walk this back, you can see how tight the margins get. So if we go back from 500 basis points to 50 basis points, now that the $20,000 worth of ETH he's trying to sell is being sold for $20,050, right? Or $20,010 or something. And so, right, you might think, well, that's pretty close, right? We see volatility in a 5-minute candle that's more than that anyway. So what difference does it make? Well, sometimes it makes a big difference, right? Especially if there's going to be, if there's not a lot of volume at that price, then whatever amount that was added to the price that Tyler posted is the difference between that order being almost entirely filled, right? If not entirely filled, and not being touched at all. And so if we continue to walk it back, the question is on a certain order amount, if that was the absolute top, right? And if Tyler posted a price that was absolutely perfectly timed such that the price that he was asking for as a maker exactly agreed with the market top, then he might have actually got that thing fulfilled. And that also means that any fee on top of that is the difference between him getting filled and not. So it makes a big difference. Now, we also need to consider that the cost of interacting with the chain should also be taken into account. So as takers are trading against Tyler's position, they will also, right, especially if you're an MEV, you will also want to take into account the gas that you're having to pay to a validator, right? That becomes effectively a part of the price that you have paid for the collateral that Tyler has posted. So all of these things kind of come to a head, and you have to sort of put them sort of in order of priority. Obviously, the thing that is the most deterministic is going to be the price that Tyler has chosen, right? This $20,000 or whatever we want to call it. Then let's say that it costs, $20 in gas or something like that in order to take that position. Now the effective price that the trader has actually paid is $20,000 plus $20 in gas. I usually, for new people, I make this akin to a delivery fee. You know how if you're on eBay or something and you're buying whatever you're buying, you might buy it for $500, but if the cost of delivery is like $100, you're like, well, I'm not paying $500 for this thing. I'm paying $600 for this thing, and so someone else might be posting the same item for like $550. But if the delivery cost is only $20, then now you're likely to pay more for the actual item itself because it can be delivered to you cheaper. And in a way, this, by the way, is a very good argument for getting Carbon up on cheaper chains at some point in the near future. So there's that component, right? The delivery cost is a big part of it. And then the least important part of it is the taker fee that we apply, right? Which is what I'm proposing to be like 20 basis points. So in effect, that becomes a part of the, you can roll that in with the gas cost, the delivery cost. This is the value that the taker has to pay to the protocol for the privilege of being able to trade against Tyler's position. And so as long as that number is small compared to the gas cost, we're fine. And at the moment, right, gas is not too bad. And so I think something like 50 basis points would start to bring the cost of interacting with Tyler's position, the gas cost and the taker fee would become comparable. And that's what you want to avoid. You want to make sure that the taker fee, so you basically, what I'm trying to say is you want to make sure that the price execution that Tyler has requested is the number one consideration, right? 99% of the cost is exactly what Tyler has asked for, and that's the value that's going to be going to his position. And then that last 1%, you want to make sure that 99% of that is the gas cost of the chain. And then whatever's left over is the cost that comes to the protocol. And the reason why I put it that, in that order is because, one, it means that the fee that we're setting has virtually nothing to do with whether or not Tyler's position is going to be closed or whether or not it's going to remain open. Because if we're setting a fee that means that takers don't take Tyler's position because that fee was too high, then we're failing. We're failing Tyler, right? We could have connected him with someone that's going to take him at the price that he's posted, and they didn't because the fee is too high. That's a lose, right? We've made a bad decision there. Whereas
Right.
if someone refuses to take Tyler's position because the gas cost is too high, well, there's not a fucking thing we can do about that except be on a cheaper chain, right? And so as long as, whether or not a position is taken comes down to the actual gas cost on the chain, we're fine, right? Because that's completely outside of our purview. That's something that we have no influence over. But if we're charging fees that are too high, and that causes people to not take Tyler at the price that he's posted, then that's something that we did do, and that's bad. Because at the end of the day, the product is going to be making sure that people get the prices that they asked for if those prices were available. So yeah, if we move up into like that 50 basis points kind of realm, I would start to call that obscene. 30 basis points, not too bad. Still a little bit on the high side for my liking, especially if gas prices are low. 20 basis points is where I'm starting to feel really comfortable. And anything lower than that, I obviously am getting increasingly comfortable that we can execute Tyler's order at what he chose. But now I'm wondering if the protocol is taking enough value for the services that it provides. And so that's the balancing act, right, that we're going to be in as a DAO. And in a way, it's the same pricing debate that all service providers are going through. Remember when Netflix launched, the subscription fees were tiny, right? And they provided services to a huge number of people, and they kind of bootstrapped their system, I would say, in a very effective way, and got a fairly reliable and consistent source of revenue for their business. But then, more recently, when the user base was, wasn't growing as much as that they wanted, now they're like, okay, well, let's reprice the product and see what happens. Or, they're finding other ways to bolster that kind of thing. So just remember, we're in that early phase. We want to make sure that people are getting exactly the service that they want, which in this case is if they want to sell their ETH at a certain price, and the market's happy to take them at that price, we don't want to build too many, speed bumps in the way of that thing being executed. The biggest speed bump is always going to be the gas cost of the chain, and that's fine because there's nothing that we can do about it. But if the speed bump that we add, which is the taker fee, starts to become comparable to the size of the gas fee, then we're in trouble.
I feel like
Great.
having something that's competitive is great, but having something that's a little bit better than competitive is going to be even better, especially because if we're going to be having that small maker fee, it could make up for that without deterring this from actually executing, like these trades from actually executing. It's not a deterrent to the maker, and it's going to be even more competitive and attractive to the taker. Rick, you joined us and you haven't spoken yet, so I want to ask you what your opinion is, and just remind everybody listening on the call to raise your hand, kind of invite us to participate. If you have something to say, please do. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the very last part of what Mark said is most relevant in my eyes. As I think about anytime you bring something to market, the goal is to bring on as much liquidity as possible and be able to show the value of what Carbon is able to do in a most concise way. And I think, although we are talking in most of our eyes much smaller numbers, especially when you consider what we pay in gas, having the fee be something that's not punitive to the protocol, but also enticing to those that are taking the orders is a fine balance. And I think we always can go back 6 months after we launch and revisit what rates could be once we have seen what Carbon has done. And I think out of the gate we could go 1-to-1 with what the market allows and what we see as kind of the running average. But I think that'd be short-sighted as far as onboarding users and having something to tout to makers that are out there, so that we're able to be tackled. Because most of this stuff, like Mark's also saying, is not happening from a user going and using an interface to trade. This is happening, directly on chain with very sophisticated, mechanisms out there that the smallest difference is it's higher, so therefore no, and we got to be sensitive to that. So I would contest that for at least a particular amount of time, and this is where I know people that are, I think, concerned that maybe not being aggressive enough to try to get fees coming in to bring down the deficit, have to have a little bit of a bigger picture to understand you also have to be able to focus on volume. At the end of the day, might equate to much greater fees as a whole than trying to get less volume with higher fees, right? And I think that's something we can be sensitive to.
I don't disagree with you, but I do have a question, Rick. You said tout in terms of the maker. Did you mean maker or did you mean taker?
Well, the taker is going to be the one that's going to be paying the fee, from what I understand is what we're talking about, correct?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Only because we were discussing a maker fee earlier, so I wanted to clarify.
It's something that folks that are looking to basically place liquidity with Carbon would know that there aren't great fees that are going to be punitive to keep their orders from being taken. So I think it does become somewhat of a marketing type of element that we can bring to the table, is that we're going to charge less fees, which means whatever ranges you put on there are going to execute as close to exactly what you asked for as possible, and that'll make it even more efficient and more productive.
I understand. Glenn, Paper Street, do you guys want to speak to this one at all?
I was initially kind of indifferent on 20 or 30, but Mark kind of changed my mind, and I need to think about it more on price execution from a user standpoint. Like, if you come onto the protocol and are able to really get everything done efficiently, like, you'll come back. I can just kind of see, to take the 50 basis point example, like, if it's that high and you have your orders sitting there for a long time, like, you're just going to leave, regardless of, how much on a monetary basis that could be. But also, like, 20 might be that magic mix of it, it beats maybe the market average is 30. We start at 20 is like, I'm not even seeing it as like it's attractive it's cheaper. Now I'm seeing it as more of attractive as you can execute what you need to, or you have a better chance to. And for us, for the protocol, like Rick was saying, I think at the end of the day, you'd end up making more fees, because just the more things get traded, it's more volume. And so I'm with Mark on this one. Like, my vote would be for 20.
Thanks, Paper Street. Glenn, I know you had a lot to say in terms of the maker fee. Do you have anything that you want to add to the taker? No, I know
I'll
Glenn was
jump
kind
in.
of in and out. Glenn was kind of in and out a little bit earlier when we were talking before the call, so he might not be in the greatest area. Go ahead, Tyler.
I was just going to say, after Mark's explanation, I'm kind of with Paper Street. We should consider user experience here, and we should prioritize that over profitability, especially with initial bootstrapping phase. I think Netflix is a great precedent to look at here. They started super cheap, and obviously they've been kind of reining things in, I think, every year as they become more popular, as volume increases and all that stuff. So I think, I would love to get to that point with Carbon, but we're not there yet. We're at bootstrapping phase. So I pretty much agree with what Mark said in Paper Street.
I do too. I don't even necessarily. Oh, go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say, to add to that, Tyler, also understand that when Netflix first came out, it only did, basically this, renting of movies. And then they progressed into developing their own content and doing a lot of other things that gave more value to it. And I think that's another thing we could see with Carbon, with a lot of other things it's going to position us for, that then also would justify higher fees and things like that. and different fee structures, whether it be higher or just different, that would equate at the end of the day to just an overall net gain in overall fees. And sometimes that comes from more volume at a smaller rate, and sometimes it's higher rate at a smaller volume. But again, all that's for long term.
Yep, for sure.
I think that the conclusion, at least in my view, is that the product is price execution, right? Like that, if people come in and they say, I want to sell this and I want this in return, then we should be making sure that we don't stand in the way of that. And I think something like 20 basis points is so small, right? The volatility on these assets is so much higher than that. And the amount that the protocol is charging is so low compared to the use of the chain itself that, it would be very difficult to level a critical argument against that choice. Also want to point out that even though, these basis points fees are proportional, taking 20 basis points on a $1,000 order versus a $1 million order can be very, very different things. And so we came to this example where someone's selling something for 20,000. What if they were selling it for 20 million, right? At that point, 20 basis points can be very different, right? It's like the difference between 20 and 30 becomes not negligible anymore, because it's possible, and you should consider this very carefully, that there will be some people that are posting very large orders that might actually, that could potentially stress the market to try and execute at that price at a certain point in the market. So, dropping it back from 30 to 20 means that we're much more likely to be able to meet the needs of those types of traders. And I think that that's, a demographic that we really don't want to turn our back on.
Lasai, you want to add to this? Thanks for joining us here up on the stage.
Thanks. So I just wanted to say that 20, I wanted to mostly agree that 20 seems like the right place. But my reasoning is that if we were to consider doing different fee levels for different kinds of pools, for example, stable to stable pairs, then I would consider going under 20, and then for higher volatility pairs over 20. But if we are talking about just doing one flat fee across the board, then 20 seems like a fairly reasonable middle ground. So that's really all I wanted to add.
So then that brings up...
I want to return to an earlier point that I raised, which is that, for those specific pairs, I would rather have a specific product, because the thing that we're launching with is really sort of buy low, sell high type of thing. And for those stablecoin trades, we are looking to sort of catch, to catch these wicks. Or at least that's what the makers on our system are going to be hoping to catch. And I don't think that 20 basis points is necessarily going to be standing in the way of that. And, this is something that, we can communicate. I can work with Nate or anyone else who's preparing, blogs and things about how to take that into account when you are setting your, when you are setting up your strategy. But in the end of the day, stablecoin volume is really a race to the bottom. The fee earnings on USDC DAI pairs and things like that is de minimis. And we can compete with those kinds of things. And, as I pointed out in like I said, in some of the materials that I've released earlier, I do have designs that would allow us to produce exactly those types of products. But it's not, I consider those as being sort of a separate discussion, right? It's not the product that we are, talking about. And it kind of comes back to what Rick was saying about later developments and things that we can build on top of Carbon in the future. And while those are really nice, I want to make sure that we keep the conversation as as light on distractions as possible, right? Let's just talk about exactly what we're launching with, and in this particular case, it will be a fee that is applied across all pairs, right? And this is going to keep the gas considerations and execution on the contracts as simple and as clean as possible. And if we do decide that that there's these other markets that we think we can be competitive in, and I'm sure that I'm already confident that we can. I just wanted to point out that I consider that a separate discussion to the topic that we're trying to sort of pin down right now.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I wasn't trying to get us off topic. I was mostly trying to say that I came to a similar conclusion coming from a different angle.
It's kind of nice.
Wasn't being critical. It was more of a blanket statement to try and keep the conversation as laser focused as we can.
Sure.
Mark, when we're talking about, like, we're having this discussion because you're preparing this proposal, right? And we're talking about obviously putting our beta release on mainnet. Would this be a whole nother discussion in terms of fees then? Out of curiosity, you mentioned going to an L2 or a different L1 later on, like at a different point in time. Would we be revisiting this conversation, or is this kind of how we all see this going to be across the board for carbon in general?
Well, I think it makes sense to factor in the overall cost of using the chain when you are deploying there. So, for example, it's not controversial to say that Ethereum is pretty expensive to use, and in a way, that takes away from the profitability of protocols, right? Not just ours, but all protocols, because when you're asking a user to interact with you, most of the value accrues to validators, and you're really trying to shave your prices down as much as you can in order to remain competitive with each other, and also to make sure that the takers, the users of your system, are getting a satisfactory experience. So the way that I can liken this is that when I was a chemist, there were some suppliers that would sell you, specialty chemicals, or refined solvents, or particular gas mixtures or something that you might need. And the ones that would force you to use FedEx often you wouldn't want to use them because the cost of delivery on FedEx was just so high. And then there are other people that would offer you basically the same products at the same price, but would let you choose your carrier, would let you choose your courier. And that would mean that if you've already got an existing, contract with that courier or something, you could get the same product at the same price, but delivered a lot cheaper. In this sense, Ethereum is FedEx. Right? If you're interacting with our protocol on Ethereum, you have to pay the validator the fee that they demand, and it is high compared to other chains. And so when we're on other chains, you actually can, we could consider a higher taker fee, because it's not going to factor in as much to the overall price execution that the maker is asking for. So yeah, if we're on a layer 2 or another layer 1 that doesn't have the same overhead for the user as Ethereum does, then we're effectively not we're not in the position of having to fork over as much of the protocol's profitability to the validator. And so yeah, on other chains, I would be happy going to numbers that are quite a bit higher than 20 basis points. But again, it's a discussion that I think we should save until we're actually deploying on other chains.
Right. That would require a whole nother proposal and everything as well. I didn't mean to go off topic either. Numiasma, thanks for joining us. If you want to unmute yourself and give us your opinion on all of this, we'll have it.
Without being too distracting, but in the interest of enhancing Carbon's appeal and convenience, does it make sense to have Bancor recommended ranges and demarcated nonprofit ranges for any specific market based on some algorithm that would factor in gas fees, swap fees, recent volatility, the moving average, average volume, sort of the way that options and futures are priced? Traders could still certainly set whatever fixed range parameters they personally want. But then as time passed, it would also suggest adjustment as positions became out of date. So people could see that, oh, I need to update my position because it doesn't make sense anymore. And in the future, even, although this is a long-term goal, you could have perhaps ranges that are automatically adjusted using these same calculations to follow the market trends and offer a really hands-off AI experience.
I think that
Yeah.
would probably come. Oh, Mark, you can speak to it. I was just going to say, I think that would probably come at a later discussion, only because I don't believe anything like that's going to be included in the initial beta release.
Yeah,
Any sort of
won't be.
recommendations and things like that.
Yeah, so it's a terrific suggestion. The question is how to achieve it. I would prefer it's not something that Carbon has to do directly, but something that can be achieved via integrations. And so, if you've been on some of our Twitter Spaces, recently we've had calls, I think, around Christmas with protocols like Arrakis. And these are the kinds of integrations that I think that could allow for that type of vault strategy to be implemented on top of Carbon in exactly the manner that you've asked for. The problem with us doing it with a protocol like ours, doing it from scratch, is that that's a huge amount of gas overhead. What you're talking about would require like Oracle price feeds and other things. And it also introduces a pretty significant attack surface area. I get very, very nervous when, we start discussing things about changing users' price ranges and stuff on their behalf. Because while their permission might be implicit, it does put an enormous amount of fiduciary responsibility in the hands of the person that is going to actually execute that transaction. And so you could potentially do something like this via a keeper network or similar, where using conditional logic or other things, you actually do permission a keeper to execute those kinds of transactions for you. But again, that has a gas overhead. You need to tip the keeper, you need to tip the validator, and so on. It's really what we've got is an infrastructure, a trading infrastructure that will allow people to build these types of resources on top of it. And I am very interested in getting that kind of functionality up and off the ground. But I want to stress that this should always be considered something that is offered by a third party, because there's just too much there that I don't want to be responsible for.
Well,
actually,
thank you, Mark.
the one that comes up most frequently is even just things like a stop loss, right? And it's surprising, the people that I have these conversations with don't realize just how dangerous stop losses are. And I think Stefan and I have both spoken about this. I think it was on our call with Alex, who's he does a lot of these criticisms of AMMs and things. But a stop loss it puts an enormous amount of power in the hands of people that are literally controlling the prices of things. So, for example, there was a tweet 2 weeks ago about a $1.5 million long, I think, that was liquidated on Bybit within like 5 minutes of it being placed. And across the industry, we hear about things like scam wicks and stuff all the time, and this is exactly what it's referring to. If I see that you've got a stop loss, then that's basically you telling me that if the price moves to a certain point, that I can buy your tokens from you at whatever price I can execute for at the time that the stop loss is activated. And if I control both the current market price and the price that you can execute at, then I can essentially liquidate you for free at whatever price that I think I'm not going to go to jail for. And this is exactly what happens on these leveraged exchanges like every day. And so when you see something, go take a very quick dive down to, down 50% and then quickly recover, just assume that this is because, some nefarious influence has removed their liquidity from the exchange, traded the price down, activated your stop loss, bought your tokens at whatever price that they think is reasonable, fulfilled your stop loss, and then brought the price back to wherever it started. Because of the adversarial nature of Ethereum and because of its anonymous and decentralized nature, that kind of stuff is even easier to do, because at least on Bybit and things, it is regulated. And so if you do that too often or in such an egregious way that it upsets the regulator, then they're going to they're going to take you to court over it. Whereas on Ethereum, you can't take some anonymous address that you tipped as a keeper to manage your position for you. You don't even know who they are, let alone expect them to be under the same regulatory to exist under the same regulatory umbrella as what you get on some of these other exchanges. So I am worried about those types of plugins. But for some token pairs, especially the big ones, and for some networks that I know don't, that do hold themselves to a good standard and that are unlikely, I think, to abuse that kind of power, then certainly that kind of stuff can be introduced via third-party integrations. But it does, there's no such thing as a trustless stop loss, and I think that is important to realize. Anything that's going to involve, some external data and then decisions being made, in accordance with that data, it is a trusted model, right? You are always trusting someone to deliver that data to you, and then you're trusting someone to execute based on that data, and you're trusting them that they aren't colluding with another source in order to take advantage of the fact that they know exactly what you're going to do. So it's it's a big can of worms that I would rather save for a much later time, and I would much rather discuss it with an integrator that's looking to offer these kinds of features on top of Carbon, rather than us having to develop those tools ourselves.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Nimiasma, for your question. I want to bring it back to the protocol fees. We had a question submitted here. What if the fee comes out of the profit? Person wants to sell at $20,000, sells at $20,000, and the fee comes out of the $18,000 profit, so it doesn't affect the sell order. And the fee would only be a % of the profit, not the total price.
So that's kind of reversing that's essentially saying that there are no taker fees, but only maker fees. And in general, I think it kind of flies in the face of the product that we're hoping to provide. It would also mean having to track profits and losses across all of those other positions. So I think from a product perspective, it's demonstrably worse. But really, these things are all kind of speaking to the same. It does eventually come down to a semantic argument. Because if Tyler wanted to sell the ETH order that he placed at 20,000 and it didn't sell until $20,050, then technically that $50 could have been a part of his profits, right? It did have to wait for a slightly higher sell, and so it kind of did come out of it. So really, they are one and the same thing. It's just a question of how do you execute it in the cleanest way possible, and how do you do it in such a way that isn't upsetting anyone. And I think taking it from people's profits is a lot more upsetting than just selling their stuff at a slightly higher markup of 50 basis points. But realistically, it's the same thing.
Right. Okay. And then we had another comment. Dynamic fees that are determined by the chain being used and minimum maximum parameters. Example, 1% fee, minimum $1 to use unless over 100, and it'll be 1% to no more than $500 fee or X amount. Fee to be paid by profit, fee to be included in sell price.
Yeah. So again, this comes down to cleanliness. I think that the more conditional logic that we add on, just remember that that's building in gas inefficiency. Okay. And so we can have all of that flexibility, but overall it would eventually translate to having to fork over even more profits to the validator, because they're the ones that have to build their blocks that way, and we're asking people to pay more in gas, which means that coming back to my speed bumps analogy, is that as that speed bump gets larger and larger, we can't realistically, charge the fees that we would like to, because there's only so much inefficiency the market will tolerate before they decide to trade somewhere else.
Got it. Okay, so cleanliness, user experience. actually like staying competitive, right? And attracting as many trades as we possibly can. Paper Street, you unmuted. Do you want to add something to that?
Not to that, not to change the subject too harshly, but where did we land on BNT's role? Was that too early of a stage? Is that something a bridge we cross much later on?
I'm sorry, for what?
For BNT's possible role in fees, meaning, if you're trading in a BNT pool or if you're a BNT holder, if that has any effects on the respective fees.
You know what? That was an open. I'm not sure it was actually discussed.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
If it was, go ahead.
So I think a couple of things about BNT's role. So one is that we still want to maintain this, BNT is a sort of the natural numeraire for the protocol. And with that in mind, I think it makes sense to not charge makers who are using BNT as a part of their pair. And so that's something that I will be proposing, and I'm sorry that I didn't bring it up earlier, and I thank you, Will, for bringing it up now. The maker fee, I just want to waive it for anyone that's making markets with BNT. This is beneficial in so many ways, and probably something that we should save for a later discussion. But keeping BNT liquid is something that I consider to be a personal priority, and anything that we can do to remove as much friction as possible, and also make sure that users of the protocol who are using BNT, just let them know that it's their protocol, right? Why would we charge them to use their own protocol? And in that sense, I'm happy to waive the maker fee. I would rather keep the taker fee on that one, but I would also entertain waiving that as well. And then also the question of what to do with all of the protocol fees. In my, what I had originally envisioned for a protocol like this one would be that BNT is the payment token of the system. And so anyone who is wanting to use it would pay both the maker fee and the taker fee in BNT. Problem is that adds considerable friction, right? Because you're basically asking people to make sure that they've got BNT in their wallet to interact with the system, on top of like the gas token that they need to interact with the chain. Whereas if we are charging the maker fee the way that we've detailed here, they already have the gas token, and so we collect that. And then on the taker side, they only need to have the token that they're hoping to trade, and then we collect either the source or the target. And then we can actually just batch these tokens being sold back into BNT, which effectively would mean that the protocol is collecting all of the fees in the system in BNT. It's just that it can be denominated in whatever the user is using, and then we do the cleanup thereafter. Want to point out as well that because Carbon is an order book, the protocol can actually just be its own maker. So with all of the fees and things that it's accumulating, it can actually just create its own positions to essentially sell those tokens, its non-BNT tokens for BNT, just by making markets with them, which again actually improves the liquidity of BNT, which is great. And it also means that we don't have to defer to some external source to try and trade those tokens for us. I think tapping into the existing arbitrage networks on Ethereum is just the most attractive possible way that we can go about doing that. But the point that I'm making is that if we adopt that exact system, then BNT is the payment token of the network, right? It's just once removed. And so economically, it still makes a lot of sense, right? It's the same. Imagine if Chainlink, for example, said that they're happy to accept Oracle fees in any token that you want, and then they will liquidate whatever fees that they receive into Link on the other side. That's exactly what we're doing. So it's it has the same payment token principle that Chainlink does, just that the actual conversion of those tokens into BNT is something that we handle so that the user doesn't have to.
I love all of that. Like, full agreement.
I actually do too, and I think that liquidity issues, that's something that we've spoken about so often, Mark, on Twitter Spaces going back like a year now. So to make sure that we have a liquid market, I think is like grossly important. And I also agree with what you said. I mean, it's our DAO, it's our token, it's our protocol, you know, to incentivize users to trade it, I think would be really beneficial to us in the long run.
Yeah,
I don't know if
the
you have
traders are what you
anything.
want.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, people think of liquidity like differently. I'd say it's sufficiently abstract concept that there is more than one correct way to think about it. But the like really like at its most fundamental level, liquidity is the amount of stuff that you can buy or sell at a certain price. Right? That is literally liquidity. And that how you achieve that, you know, you can achieve it with AMMs because you've always got, you know, sort of passive or latent liquidity there that's waiting to be bought or sold at a certain price, and that has served a valuable purpose. But really, the unspoken like cornerstone of making sure that that liquidity actually means something is the people that are actually spot trading against it. And for Carbon, and with, you know, with a view to making BNT liquid, what you actually want are the day traders, right? The people that are actually, you know, asking for a certain price or bidding at a certain price. And so to you know, to give them a whole bunch of different token pairs that the protocol has already you know, has already accumulated, and that the protocol has you know, got its own bids and asks for, and things like that. Like that does attract the liquidity that matters, which is that human component. Right. And this is something that it took me more than a year to appreciate, and is one of the shortcomings of AMMs generally, is that just having tokens there and, you know, offering a price is not enough, right? You actually need it to be something that people are actively engaging in, and that engagement is like more than 2/3 of like the actual liquidity value. And it's the difference between something that's illiquid, despite having hundreds of millions of dollars of liquidity on chain somewhere, and something that is like genuinely liquid, despite it not really having much collateral anywhere. Right? Some things can be very, very liquid, even though the you know, the actual like locked up reserves of it or something is quite low. So there, you know, there are nuances to this argument, but I think that you know, having the protocol actively engage you know, those demographics by offering tokens that it's collected at a certain price that you give BNT to the protocol for is a very healthy and natural way for this market to develop.
Well, I think that kind of answered your question, right? You agreed. I'm actually, I mean, I want to ask everybody, are we in agreement here? And does anybody disagree with what Mark was saying?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's I've been thinking through like how I can't remember when the first time we talked about how BNT would play, but it seems like this was the original discussion, and it just kind of stuck in my head. And I do love if it's our protocol, if you're a BNT holder or if you're part of this, and so like why charge those users, but also it's kind of a friendly incentive to other users to use BNT as part of the protocol. Like you know, you can save on these fees, but it's instead of, like you were saying, paying the fees in BNT, like, man, that could really be a headache for somebody coming in. It's like, well, I gotta, you know, I gotta take that extra step to just get started. Like I like the idea of doing that on the back end on our own time. Just smooth user interface and user experience, and feels like a win-win.
I feel like that's what we're going for here too. We're about to start the round 2 of the UI UX demos. It's all, I mean, the whole entire idea behind this is to keep everything as smooth as possible. And that kind of carries over into these and the way that the actual protocol well. Not, I want to clarify something real quickly, and maybe we can kind of summarize a little bit. I want to bring it back to the maker fee. You know, the original question was, won't it happen? And we kind of sure agreed as a DAO, yes, right? Am I right in saying it's a flat percentage fee based on an included in gas fee, including it in the gas fee? You can elaborate on that, or correct me if I'm mistaken.
You mean on the maker side?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it should be a flat percentage on the gas, which would mean that because when you're creating, let's say that you're going to pay, I don't. Let's just say, just to keep the numbers easy, let's say you pay a gas fee of $10, right? That's going to be the same if you're setting up a position worth $100 or a position worth $100 trillion, right? The gas doesn't care about how many tokens you are, setting up or what your position parameters are or anything like that. And so when I say that it should be a flat fee on the gas cost, let's say in that, again, to keep the numbers around, let's say it's 10%, which it's not going to be, but it at least makes the numbers easy to handle. If you're paying $10 in gas to set up your position, you're actually going to pay $10 plus $1, right, worth of ETH. $10 will go to the validators, $1 will go to the protocol. And that will be the same if you're creating a position with 0.1 ETH. And it'll be the same if you're creating a position with 1 million ETH. It'll be exactly the same cost. And coming back to what I was saying before, this makes the overall cost to use the protocol negligible for the very large trader accounts, and they're the ones that, in a way, like, that's the target you want to hit. Because if they're like, yeah, I don't care, like, some of them might even tip the miner double the gas cost just to get their position, their position in the queue in the block ahead of someone else. And so I think that that's at least a reasonable way to handle it. I need to talk to our contract engineers about precisely how that should be handled. But the takeaway is that the maker fee, I hope, or what I'm shooting for, is going to be small enough to be negligible, and the same no matter how large your position is. And this would mean that we attract much larger positions, which will mean that spot trading and stuff becomes much easier to execute, and the protocol becomes overall more liquid. And those people that are setting up very, very large positions, you kind of don't want to charge them, because they're going to bring the traffic that matters the most, right? Which is the takers, and the taker fees are always going to be higher than the maker fees. And if you want to convince yourself that I'm not just making this up, you can go to any of your favorite exchanges, the ones that you're, whatever onboards you into whatever chain you're using, and try and use their order book. Somewhere in the terms and conditions, it will tell you exactly what the maker and taker fee is. The one that I find to be the most transparent is OKX. And I think it's like right there at the bottom of the order book. It'll tell you what the maker fee and the taker fee is. And when you're setting it up, it will tell you what the maker fee is and so on, what the cancellation fee is and that kind of thing. And it's very, very small. But when you're trading on their book, the fee is like, 300%, 500% higher. And so they know where their bread and butter is, right? They know that they want people in their book posting orders, and that the takers, you can charge them a much higher amount because it factors a lot less into their decision making. Generally, spot traders have a much higher price tolerance, just because of the nature of spot trading. Like, you don't really know what the execution is going to be like. You can set the tolerance level, but whatever. It's the price tolerance of the taker is generally much, much higher than that of the maker. And if that business model is working so well for all of these other order book like products, then I think that it would behoove us to borrow from their experience and at least model our economics after what they're doing.
Okay, perfect. And that makes sense. And then for the takers, 20% or 20 basis points, right? We're going to have the small maker fee. We're going to have the 20 basis points. I think that's kind of what we had said. And again, I know I've said it all throughout the call, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows if they have something to say about the maker fee, the taker fee, whatever it is, please join the conversation. Because like I had mentioned in the announcements, and like Mark had said earlier on the call, the outcome of this call is what's going to go into the proposal that he's preparing for the carbon launch for the Bancor DAO. So it is important, if you have something to say, please speak up on it. Okay, so that's small fee for the makers, and that'll be on day one with that beta on mainnet. Correct. Okay, and then 20 basis points, I think we all kind of decided for takers would be appealing and attractive to anybody coming in looking to be a taker on the protocol and to execute these trades. Okay, and then go ahead.
And it's important to realize, I think, or like I should underscore this point, that the 20 basis taker fee is across all token pairs. It's going to be a nightmare. Well, not too much of a nightmare, but it's going to be problematic. It's going to take us a little bit more time. It's going to add additional gas overhead if we want to do it on a per token pair basis. And so I think the other thing that I want to make sure that we all agree on is that 20 basis points across the board is acceptable. Remember that all of these things are changeable parameters, right? If I was wrong in this call and Ethereum starts to attract huge volumes, which I expect that it will in the next year, and maybe after the next Ethereum upgrade, the gas prices start to come down or something like that. And if 20 basis points no longer makes economic sense, the DAO can still vote to change it, but it will likely be, unless we decide not to, it will likely be to change it across all token pairs, not single token pairs, because it's a different smart contract construction to enable it on specific pairs. So I would prefer an across-the-board approach, just to keep everything clean. And that's my position. And if anyone wants to argue with me on that, I welcome it. Just know that it is much more complex to set it up on a per token basis.
I not only welcome it, I actually encourage it. It's nice when somebody will actually challenge what Mark is saying. I think it makes, one, it teaches me. So it's nice to actually listen in on these conversations. But two, it's important that we all actually have a full understanding of what it is that we're proposing here. Okay, and then on top of that, the last thing that we had discussed was BNT strategies. Any strategy including BNT will not have a maker fee. I think those were our three outcomes here.
Yeah, and again, I'll confer with the smart contract team to make sure that these points are well understood, and I'll make sure that whatever goes into the proposal is the most informed version of itself. But I think that this is at the end of the day, with all of the material that we've put out and things, it's going to be a really lean proposal. I think that it will be hyper focused on this fee stuff. And then, the rest of the implementation details and things we can refer to some of the other documents. So I'll try and keep those paragraphs relatively short.
Great. Okay. Last chance, everybody up on stage here, all of the speakers. Anybody else anybody else in the audience that wants to raise their hand and join us in the meantime, please do. Miasma, go ahead.
All right, so I got just a tiny bit of pushback on that common 20 basis points taker fees position. I just think that you're leaving a lot of money on the table where Bancor has a semi-monopoly on the token. We set some pretty good fees on, I can't remember the names of the tokens, but we had basically the only trading in these tokens. And so as a monopolizer of that market, we were able to set fees higher. Maybe that's just something that you want to do down the road. So anyway, that's the only thing I have to say on that. I also would like to suggest a warning on gas costs for small positions. When I very first started with Bancor, I did an experimental liquidity deposit of 10 link into the pool. And this was completely silly at the time because I eventually discovered that the gas cost to cash out my position was larger by a lot than my investment. So I would like, and I was not the only one to suffer from this. As I watched different people depositing, I said, these people can't make money. They can't get their position out. The gas cost is too high. And that leads me to my final question, which is, Do you think gas costs will limit long-term creative expansion of carbon or third-party add-ons, and will this fairly quickly force carbon onto an L2, or will eventually Ethereum sharding eliminate the need for an L2 migration?
It's a really great question. I think even if Ethereum sharding does eliminate a lot of those problems, we're still going to go to an L2. I compared to our previous products, there's really no reason for carbon to not exist everywhere where we think that there's a market for it. And I agree with you with the gas warning thing. The good news is that we've run tests and we're still optimizing, but it was like only 100K in gas or something for a withdrawal, which is pennies really. So I think the specific problem that you've elaborated on here was due to things like rewards contracts and stuff that existed on version 2.1, which added considerable gas overhead. And we don't really have any of those problems on carbon, which is nice. It will always be super lean for makers. Like that is the number one priority here. But just wanted to point out that even if Ethereum becomes the cheapest chain, that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't consider putting carbon on other chains. And the gas warning thing, I agree. We'll have something in the UI.
And leaving money on the table with fees for monopolistic pools?
Yeah. So coming back to my previous point, it comes down to whether or not you can set the fee for certain pairs, because like the way you would need some sort of system that allows the DAO to vote on specific pairs. So let's say we've got a monopolistic token, and we want to charge I've seen trading fees on it. One, it's not great for optics. I would much rather, more volume through it. So even on monopolistic tokens, if you drive the trading fee too high, it's basically costing volatility, and you might actually end up in a better position charging less because it encourages more people to interact with those positions. It's a different paradigm. We want people to set up more orders, and then for those people to be taking those orders rather than have a single liquidity pool that's trading everything. But I hear your point. There might be some pairs that are like extremely profitable, but then the question is like, how do you want to govern that? Let's say that let's just call it TKN, and Carbon has all of the liquidity for that particular token. Do we set it up so that the taker fee is just on that one? Because people might be creating pairs with it versus DAI versus USDC versus BNT versus ETH and so on. So do you want the fee to be high on all of those pairs? Because remember, I said that depending on which function you call will determine whether or not the fee is being taken from the source of the target. And so if there's a discrepancy there, where like the fee on the DAI side is 20 basis points, but the fee on the TKN side is 50 basis points, for example, then I'll just always call the other function, right? And now a negligible change in the trading fee can add up to a substantive change in the trading fee. And so having just one token being listed as the thing that we want to charge a higher fee on, you can still get around that because you can just trade the other token instead. Which would mean then that we would need to set up a matrix, right, for every token that is paired with this one token. Then the fee is this other thing, but that means that every single time you trade, whether or not that token is involved or not, you still need to run the computation and pay the gas cost to work out whether or not that token is part of that matrix, and whether or not you're trading from source or from target, and how that impacts the cost of the trade and that kind of thing. So it adds it sounds like a simple idea, but executing it and implementing it is not. I think that what I said in the beginning again was cleanliness. I would rather have everything be the same, because again, that trade by source or trade by target calculation becomes meaningless. And it means we don't have to maintain a table of all of the different trading fees and all of the different tokens that have different trading fees and so on, which is, that storage that we need to pay for in the contracts, and every time that you want to call it, that's more gas that you have to pay. And because you're paying more gas, no matter which token you're trading, again, that's eating into the profitability of the protocol, because now you're paying more funds to the validators and you're getting to keep less for yourselves. So if we did have this monopoly on a certain token, the question is it so valuable that we're willing to concede the cost on trading every other token pair in the system? And maybe we will get there. Maybe there will be, something that is that advantageous. But just remember that it's like you don't get it for free. If you are, want to bring in these dynamic fees and things for one token, you have to apply it to every token. And that will mean a much larger gas overhead and, potentially a lot less competitiveness. We might run into, order execution problems and other things. And in my opinion, it's not worth considering it until we actually have a token that we can point to and we can actually start running calculations on, because it will require sacrificing profits elsewhere in the network in order to support it.
Yeah, I think this comes at a later point in time, considering, maybe once we actually launch and we see what like in the sort of acting, I think maybe then it sounds like it might be a case by case. If we do have some sort of a monopoly on something, then we can revisit it. I definitely think for like the initial launch, though, we should just stick with that 20 basis points. That's my own opinion, and we revisit it in the future if we deem necessary. I definitely don't want to be on the table, but I don't want to complicate things to start either.
Like let's imagine, for example, here's a good analogy. Let's imagine that like Disney Plus actually did fail, right? And that they would continue licensing their films to like Netflix. And they charge, so like Disney's IP was like among the most expensive in the industry. Like if you wanted a Pixar film on your streaming service or something, it would cost sometimes like 30% of the overall licensing budget, just for that one film. So like that one film costs 30% of your entire subscription fee, even though you've got access to like thousands of films on that streaming service. And this was like one of the things that I think Netflix did speak about in like an investor group meeting like 3 years ago. It's like, well, like maybe we just don't deal with Disney anymore, because we can actually provide more content to everyone who wants to watch things other than Disney films. And if you want to watch a Disney film, then maybe you should just go and get it somewhere else. And that's kind of where Disney Plus, I guess, sort of carved out its own niche. So that's the question, right? If you are Netflix and you say, fine, we want to put on, Toy Story into our catalog, but we have to raise the subscription costs by 30%. Like, is it worth it? Maybe it is. Like, maybe Toy Story is so popular that that just having it there is going to cause more, is going to bring more profits to the system, and you can justify that hike in the subscription cost. But if you don't think that, right? If you think that you're going to upset more users, or that you're, not spending your catalog budget well, then that's a completely different calculus. So until we end up in that position where there is a Toy Story like token that's going to that where we think might justify increasing the costs across the entire system in order to try and milk a little bit more profits out of it, then that's a very difficult decision that we may have to make at some point in the future. But straight out of the gates, I think a clean execution is the one that we should be thinking about. And I hope that analogy helped. If I confused anyone, I apologize, but it's probably it's the best I can do for 6:30 in the morning.
It's great, and definitely something we can revisit. Numi Osma, did you have another question? I have one that was submitted here as well.
Yeah, I just curious whether in the end we really are chasing more like breadth of offering and volume, rather than monkeying with fees over the long term. It just seems like fees are kind of an intractable mess, and trying to figure out, how much can we raise them without quenching volume? When does it make sense to raise them? What are the metrics for knowing? I mean, obviously in a bull market, we can probably increase them because everybody's just rampaging, trying to trade left and right. But maybe just in the end, it doesn't make any sense to even think about it. Just set a standard and then just work on the volume and get our money that way.
You mean
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
kind of where my head
make
is
sense
at.
to revisit?
No, I no, like the arguments that that Miasma has raised, they're good points. Like, I don't want anyone to think I'm being too dismissive. I know that sometimes I can be too argumentative or like apparently stubborn, and I just want everyone to know that that's not my case. It's just that when I'm in a debate, I present, exactly my points. The question about being in a bull market, for example, is a good one. We know that people do get a lot looser with their cash, and you can, you may want to grow or adjust fees dynamically based on market conditions. But again, remember, it's always about price execution. In a bull market, people might be posting more ambitious order prices, right? So like we might see, during the next phase, a very large amount of liquidity being posted at like ETH at $10,000 or up to $20,000 or $25,000 or something like that. And if you say, well, we're in a bull market, we can just charge larger fees, we're still going to be encroaching on that price execution of what people are posting. So the point that I'm making is that even in a bull market, as the bar moves away from you, you still are ending up making the same decisions that we make in a market that's trending sideways or trending down. The most important things are always going to be the gas cost on the chain and the price execution of the maker's order. So bull market or not, I think that the same assumptions apply in all situations. But I also concede that that's an overly simplistic, verging on naive standpoint. It's really, I'm just trying to come up with something that we can agree on that's not going to be too controversial for the proposal. But just know that the fee is adjustable, and if we want to move, if the DAO decides that they really do want to support a per token fee, despite the gas overhead that would impose on the system overall, then we can still do that, right? We're not being inflexible. I'm just trying to work out what I should put in the proposal like today. And
right, I think this would be a whole nother discussion when the time comes. Is what I'm thinking. Sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to, but no, I agree with you.
Yeah, no.
Like what?
No, it's fine.
Like what is actually in the proposal, right? And then when the time comes, I mean, the DAO voted to increase the fees on the link pool at one point, right? I think that was like a per case sort of discussion that we had, and conclusion DAO came to. I kind of almost see this in that same sense.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. But remember that the way that those contracts were created was so that each pool could have its own fee. And if we want to have that kind of architecture here, I need to know, because it will change it will have a dramatic effect on the way that the way that the contracts are created. And I think it would it would add so much more gas overhead, right? Coming back to what Numiasma said about, the withdrawing, like, adding stuff to link pool and withdrawing it from link pool and things like that. And the gas cost of that transaction. Just remember that all of these decisions that we make about, like all of the things that have been discussed, whether it's a per token fee or if it's the ability to, add EMAs and, this additional conditional logic, so that prices can move automatically and have that AI experience and all of that kind of stuff. It's going to add to the gas cost of everything, of creating a position, of trading against positions, all of it. And so it is a question of how much do you think people will be happy to pay for stuff, and how much wiggle room do you think there is on the price execution that they've asked for? Because in my mind, this is based on feedback from the last 2 years, people don't want to pay a lot of gas, right? They want the gas to be as lean as possible. And within that margin of what we think an acceptable gas cost is, we want to offer the most feature rich, right? The most reliable protocol that we possibly can. And as we tack on some of these other things, even something as seemingly small as the ability to set a fee on each token independently, it does, eat into your acceptable gas budget. And so with that in mind, my position is it should just be across the board. And, we can look to upgrading the contracts or something later if it becomes a problem. But I would rather assume that the economics are relatively sound and that we're happy with this fee model, because it means that the protocol is collecting value. And remember that we're still like, head and shoulders above even the market leader right now, which doesn't collect anything for the protocol. And that when we're doing that, we're still not, we're not impeding users really at all. The makers are still getting the price execution that they wanted, within whatever the gas cost of the chain is, and within this tiny taker fee that we've asked. And that the maker fee is so small that it doesn't really impact the overall gas transaction of setting up the thing in the first place. And so with that sort of minimalism mentality, I think that we're on very strong ground. But as soon as we start sort of elaborating on stuff and making things more complex, it has these kind of unseen costs that I think will, have a detrimental impact on the overall user experience. Again, referring to the anecdote that we had from Numiasma earlier about what it was like adding and removing small amounts of tokens from B2.1 and other things. So I think, yeah, I'm for the minimalism approach. Keep everything super well lubricated and easy to maintain. And if we need to, let's wait and see these problems become problems, or these opportunities become opportunities, and then work out how to address those. Because I think building it into the architecture right now would mean that, we are adding more gas efficiency into the protocol. And whenever you hear me say gas inefficiency, I want you to think, okay, that's money that's being paid to validators instead of to the protocol. And so, there's always going to be this trade-off.
I'm with you. I don't see going back and making any adjustments to the contracts the way that they've been created and audited and everything else to make it a less enjoyable user experience, having to, pay more to create these strategies, or for takers to come in, execute these trades, and then to have to pay more in a fee. I don't see that as a win for us, at least not right off the bat. If I can ask this one last question, Mark, with the BNT role, would there be a minimum amount of BNT? And I'm asking Mark, asking everyone. When I say Mark, I mean everyone. So please, I'm encouraging you all to continue participating in the conversation. With the BNT role, would there be a minimum amount of BNT that needs to be provided or within a strategy? Or is building BNT, and would they utilizing the single-sided liquidity? So that's what we're calling a disposable strategy. So just one order, whether it be the buy or the sell order.
Can you summarize that for me?
Sure. It's not just holding BNT, correct? It's actually using BNT, providing BNT within strategy.
Yeah.
First
part, of course.
Okay.
Like you can hold BNT, and there's that's not that you're not interacting with the protocol if you just hold BNT.
Right. Okay. And then in terms of breaking it down, creating a strategy, we have the recurring, which is orders and our rotating liquidity with the buy and the sell, or we have the disposable strategies, which is just the buy or the sell order. Just to clarify for everybody on the call, what do we see as no make fee for using BNT within a strategy?
Any of them.
Oh, got it.
Any of the above, right? In my view, there's there is a programmable object that we call a strategy. And whether or not it's disposable or recurring is semantics, right? That's really just the parameters that you set up on that strategy. It's helpful to categorize these things, right, into different, into different classes, because it has user facing, ramifications. In a way, it's a different, they achieve different things, but at smart contract level, they're indistinguishable. They're the same thing. And so the maker fee is always when you are posting a price for something, whether it be on both sides or one side as at a single price or at a range of prices, doesn't make a difference.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I would thank everybody for joining. Unless anyone has anything else to add, we are approaching a 2-hour DAO discussion today. Numiasma, go ahead. Is it protocol fees? Go ahead.
No, it's just one last pretty critical question. It's like, how do we measure success? How do we know when carbon is doing better than something else we could have done? And how do we distinguish it from increased revenues that might have generated from just having a bull market?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, so in my view, measuring success is going to be about whether or not people's orders are being filled at the prices that they wanted them to be when there was an opportunity to fill them. Right? I'm definitely taking a sort of user first stance here. That if the product is strong, then what will be indicative of that is that when you set an order to sell your ETH at 20,000 during the next bull market, and it happens to get to 20,000, your order should be filled, right? And as long as we keep giving that level of price execution certainty, and that it happens, regularly, that your certainty that if you place an order with carbon, and that there isn't a market opportunity, that it will always be filled. That's success. And I think that if we keep that in mind, then the specifics about how much the protocol charges for these services and things like that is going to get these conversations are going to get easier. I think at the moment we start small, we build and we iterate, right? And as long as people are getting as long as people see value in the service and they're getting the service that they asked for, consistently, right, and without sort of these, without any asterisks, then that is how I measure success. As long as that is being successful, remember, for every order that is fulfilled, that's fees that the protocol is taking, and for every order that is placed, that's fees that the protocol is taking. So we really want to make sure that as long as that the service is good and reliable, and that more and more people are using it, that's our success metric. We can always look at the actual, the books, and there's going to be some fuzziness to that with respect to, when fees are taken and what the value of those fees are at the time that they were taken and at the time that they are converted back into BNT. And in some cases, the fees held will go down in value, and in some cases, those fees will go up in value. So there's going to be a complex financial analysis there, but I think that should still be a secondary consideration to making sure that the product is doing exactly what we want it to do, and that everyone who's interacting with the protocol is happy, right? That spot traders, are getting, are not getting reverted, and that they're getting the exact price that they wanted with as little slippage as they can tolerate, and that more and more makers are coming to the system to post the prices that they're hoping to get, and that the order books are filling up, and that we have a very wide range of market support. These are the success metrics that I think should matter to us the most.
Thank you, Mark. A couple of things. I know I just said that it was a close 2-hour DAO, a really important one, and I love the fact that everybody joined and participated the way they did. So first, I want to thank everybody for being here and for taking part in the discussion. Second, we have a coffee break on Friday. We're going to be talking about paper trading competition and the meme competition. Those two kind of related in a sense, kind of working side and side. So I want to encourage everybody to please join that. They're a great time. About our different, all been kind of I don't know how much like leading up to the actual question. I would think it would still be part of the discussion. So I'll create an announcement here for that on Friday. The other thing that I wanted to say is that we're going to be going into the round 2 of the demos, I think starting maybe the end of next week. So if anyone here hasn't participated in the round 1 and they would like to participate in round 2, please definitely DM me here or on Telegram or on Twitter. I can make sure to get you scheduled for that, or you can message Tyler. And if you have participated in round 1, I would love to invite you back to participate in the round 2 and kind of see the different changes that we've made according to all the feedback that we've gotten. So with that, again, I just want to thank everybody for participating on the call and for being here today.
Thanks for hosting, Jen. Thanks everyone for participating.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. And anything else, anybody can reach out to me for sure.